Hi everyone! I will be teaching Chapter 12.4, Speaking via Electronic Media. In this section, I'll be covering the different strategies for speaking on radio and television. I will also be describing the communication skills necessary to be a spokesperson and explaining the role of crisis communication professionals. So we'll be starting off with radio. A lot of us probably think of radio as an old-fashioned form of media and barely ever use it, probably because we have many more advanced resources like YouTube and Spotify. So what is the definition of radio? Well, according to Google, the definition of a radio is the transmission and reception of electromagnetic waves of radio frequency, especially those carrying sound messages. What are some ways people use radios? It is a reliable way to access important information in the moment. Like, for example, when there's no access to cellular networks and there's a neighborhood blackout or something. Back in the days, radios were often used for sports entertainment, just like we talked about in class last week. And obviously, people often use the radio for music. Nowadays, at least in my generation, I think we turn on our radio in the car if our aux is broken or our Bluetooth isn't working. But other than that, you probably won't find us turning on the radio. Radios seek to make personal connections with listeners and viewers. If you ever listen to the radio, you will probably notice some speakers trying to engage with the audience a lot. Moving on to our next slide. We will be talking about tips for radio communication. Believe it or not, although the audience can't see your gestures and facial expressions, nonverbal communication is very important in radio communication. Using nonverbal communication makes the verbal delivery more engaging and effective. If I'm being honest, I'm trying to use these tips as I'm doing this presentation, because even though I am obviously not doing a radio, it feels very close to one as you all can't see my face and only hear my voice. The next tip is to prevent mic fright, practice with a microphone to get used to seeing it. Mic fright is increased nervousness due to the presence of a microphone. If you are anything like me, I hate the way my voice sounds in a recording or in audio. So that leads us to our next step. Get used to hearing your own voice. Remember that the way you sound in recordings is the same way other people hear you. You just hear yourself differently than everyone else. Be aware of microphones. Figure out how close or distant your mouth should be from the microphone and the kind of volume you need to use. If you're too close to a microphone, you'll probably burst the ears of people with headphones or earpieces. And if you're too far, no one can hear anything you're saying. So it is all about finding the balance and just being comfortable with your microphone. Avoid breathing directly into a microphone. This is a pretty obvious tip. Watch your verbal fillers as they are more noticeable on the radio than in person or on television. I am so guilty of this, and I am trying to work on it, so please bear with me. Speak in your natural voice and make sure to articulate and enunciate your words so you can be understood. So moving on, television. According to Google, the definition of television is a system for transmitting visual images and sound that are reproduced on screens, chiefly used to broadcast programs for entertainment, information, and education. Just like radio speakers on television are also speaking to individuals, not a crowd. Television also seeks to make personal connection with listeners and viewers, but it is difficult to make that connection if you aren't prepared for the microphones, lights, and monitors that may surround you. So that is why I'm here, to prepare you all for all of that, even though I've never done it before. Here are tips for television communication. Since television is a visual medium, appearance is important. In terms of clothing, avoid too much contrast between colors like black on white or colors that are too close to your skin tone. Avoid clothing that are too striped or patterned because it may bleed on screen. Keep in mind that jewelry, watches, or anything reflective may catch the studio lights and create distracting glare on camera. Be aware of the video and audio monitors. Video monitors are televisions that allow the on-air person to monitor their movements and see what viewers are seeing. Audio monitors allow you to hear yourself, studio producers, or another person communicating with you off-site. Audio monitors can be like an earpiece, which is like a standard for news anchors. To help create the illusion of a personal connection to the viewer, develop a mental picture of a definite person watching. We've all probably been drawn to that illusion once or twice when watching like the news or something like that without even noticing. Continuing on. Remember that your face conveys your thoughts and emotions, sometimes without you knowing it. So monitor yourself, but don't overthink it. Don't try to impersonate other people's facial expressions and tone of voice, because it will come off as an imitation rather than genuine. Hand motions should be a little slower on television. You also don't need to overthink that either. Try to keep your head up as much as possible. Avoid extra movements and stay on your mark if you are given one. So movements can take you out of frame or focus and out of set lighting or sound area. So it's just best to kind of stay still. When speaking to someone else on camera, each person should be at about a 25-degree angle from each other so they can be open to the camera while still being able to see and talk to each other. It is going to look kind of awkward in person, but it will look good on camera at least. When presenting to more than one camera, be prepared to shift your focus. You will usually get a cue from the producer and then follow the tally light, which is red above the camera. When at the end of a television segment, especially a live one, you may have to hold a position as a segment is tossed to another presenter or there's a transition to a commercial break. So I've seen so many bloopers of news anchors. I don't know if any of you have, but it's bloopers of news anchors and they would say like really embarrassing things on live TV because they thought that their segment had ended, but it didn't. So keeping position until someone tells you you're off live prevents that from happening. So for this exercise, you can pause the video to think about it or even email me your replies because I'm actually really interested in your answers. Have you ever spoken on the radio or television? If so, how did your experiences match up with the content of the section? If not, what would you be worried and or excited about? Personally, I've never spoken on the radio or television, but I would be worried about almost everything. But if I am talking about something I'm passionate about, I think I'd be really excited at the same time, too. So people often appear on the radio or television as a result of participating in a media interview. So what is a media interview? Well, according to Google, a media interview is an interview with a journalist or other member of the media for publicity purposes. The different types of media interviews include live studio interviews, recorded studio interviews, and publicity interviews. Handling a media interview is something that many people aren't prepared for. So the first thing you should do is ask some preliminary questions to help with your interview preparation. We will talk more about what questions to ask in the next slide, but to just continue on, Do some research on the interviewer and the organization they represent. The organization can easily be supporting or representing something that is against your morals or your company's morals, and the interviewer could just be someone who's trying to get something bad out of you. So you never really know. You just want to be really careful with that. If you are presenting a company or organization, you will want to contact your supervisor before accepting. Come up with 2 or 3 key messages or main points that you want to convey in the interview. Media interviewers are often looking for the soundbite. A soundbite is a verbal bullet point that is about 10 seconds or 26 words long. We will talk more about what a good soundbite would look like in a few more slides. Don't worry about creating dead air, as it will cause the interview to go off track, so just answer the questions concisely. It is the interviewer's job to worry about that, like about dead air and all that, is not yours. So just try focusing on getting your points across. It is okay to deflect questions if the interviewer tries to get you off message, but just pivot back to your prepared content. For example, you could say something like, "That's not really what I thought we were going to talk about today. I'm here to discuss blah, 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 blah." And if you don't know the answer, you can always say you don't know or refer them to someone else who might know the answer. So going back to the first tip in preparing for a media interview, these are the questions you should ask before you agree to do a media interview. Who will be interviewing me? How can I access some of this person's previous interviews? What is the segment or show I will be featured on? What information will you need from me? Will the interview be live? How long will the interview last? If the interview is being recorded and edited, how long will the aired segment be? Is there a deadline for the story? So these are all questions that you should ask and answers that you would want to know. A good soundbite. The reason why having a good soundbite is so important is because interviews that aren't live are usually edited, and only some of what you say will make it into the final cut. Also, there are time constraints, so here is what a good soundbite would usually consist of. It would be about 10 seconds or 26 words for radio or television. Connects to something current, culturally relevant, or of interest to the public. Mentions you and or your company's name. Media interviews are often good publicity. Offers a claim and some brief support for the claim. Paints a picture, is memorable, and leaves a lasting impression. An example of a soundbite that left a lasting impression on me was from Bong Joon-ho, the director of the movie Parasite. It wasn't from an interview, but the Oscars. It was from the Oscars when he won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, and this is what he said. He said, and I quote, "Once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films." And I couldn't agree more. So just like the other exercise, you can pause the video or email me your reply. Try to come up with 3 good sound bites as if you were a publicist for your favorite music artist and someone was interviewing you about them. I really like this exercise because I think so many people can get really creative with it. And if we were an in-person class, it would be so much fun to hear what people come up with. Speaking as a spokesperson. Spokespeople speak to external audiences, primarily the media, on behalf of an individual or group. You will notice a lot of brands use like celebrities as their spokesperson, just like Michael Jordan for Nike. Spokesperson are a representation of the business. They help promote, build, and maintain the brand's position by delivering messages to consumers and audiences. Some key attributes for an effective spokesperson are the abilities to establish, report, tell an engaging story, handle difficult and unexpected questions, respond to nonverbal cues, and adjust communication to match audience preferences. Tips for speaking as a spokesperson. Spokespeople must maintain their credibility, and being open is a way to do this. If they aren't credible and they are known to lie often, obviously no one will listen to them. Ideally, spokespeople facilitate a question and answer session after they present their statements. I think we've all seen people read prepared statements and then retreat without addressing questions, which usually creates a negative impression. To prepare for Q&As, the spokesperson should be involved in drafting the answers rather than being expected to read them as a script. Now, this is important because it will look more natural and it wouldn't look suspicious to the audience. Avoid overusing phrases like to be perfectly honest, frankly, and truthfully. This is because it starts to feel like you don't actually mean what you say. Being an effective spokesperson requires training and preparation, so they should have general training in communication skills. That's why some spokespeople are communication professionals. Subject matter experts are useful when dealing with complex information. Speakers who are subject matter experts should avoid acronyms and other forms of insider language and be able to convey their message in concrete terms. So it is recommended that subject matter professionals should still be trained in communication skills. It may be useful to pair a subject matter expert up with a communication expert and have the communication expert set up the interview and then turn it over to the subject matter expert. There's a lot of experts. But it just basically means that the two experts should work together as a team as it makes the job done smoother. Crisis communication. Crisis communication occurs as a result of a major event outside of normal expectations that has potential negative results, runs the risk of escalating in intensity, may result in closed media or government scrutiny, and creates pressure for a timely and effective response. 2020 was the year of crisis management. When COVID happened, businesses had to quickly figure out how to make things work and how to respond quickly. From big businesses to small ones, everyone was everywhere, and we all seen it firsthand. Examples of crisis include natural disasters, management employee misconduct, product tampering or failure, and workplace violence. Oh, and pandemics, apparently. The need for crisis communication professionals is increasing as various developments have made organizations more susceptible to crisis. Social media have made it easier for stakeholders to praise or question an organization's reputation. We all know the power of an Instagram post or a tweet and how it can instantly turn into widespread consumer activism that organizations must be able to respond to quickly and effectively. Organizations are being held liable for negligent failure to plan, which means that an organization didn't take reasonable action to reduce or eliminate known or reasonably foreseeable risks that could result in harm. There are organizations that usually wait for something terrible to happen in order to start having backup plans and how to deal with emergency situations, which is something they need to work on, in my opinion. Continuing on. Crisis communicators don't just interact with the media, they communicate with a variety of stakeholders. Stakeholders are the various audiences that have been identified as needing information during a crisis. Internal stakeholders are people within an organization or focal area, such as employees and management. External stakeholders are people outside the organization or focal area, such as customers, clients, media, regulators, and the general public. Four main areas of crisis communication. Four main areas of crisis communication research are relationships, reputation, responsibility, and response. Relationships and reputation are built and maintained before a crisis occurs. Organizations create friendships with their stakeholders, and their track record of quality, customer service, dependability, and communication determines their reputation. Responsibility refers to the degree to which stakeholders hold an organization responsible for the crisis at hand. Judgments about responsibility will vary depending on the circumstances of a crisis. Response refers to how an organization reacts to a crisis in terms of its communication and behaviors. So for this, the same rules of the other exercises applies to this one. Try to think of an example of an organization that responded poorly to a crisis situation. What could they have done better based on the information you learned in this section? I think there are many that come to my mind, honestly, and I don't know if this one counts, but the Travis Scott concert was the first thing that popped into my head. Even though it wasn't an organization or anything, it was a team of people who could have done something to prevent or stop the situation from getting as bad as it did. I'm sure most of you heard about it, but for those who haven't, in short words, Travis Scott held a concert with about 50,000 people attending the show, and people started pushing to the front of the stage, and that caused people to be compressed and unable to escape. So that led about, from what I read online, it led to about 10 deaths so far that are actually known and hundreds of people that are injured. So I definitely think that they could have done something way better to prevent all that from happening. Anyways, this concludes chapter 12.4, Speaking via Electronic Media. We covered in this chapter how to speak on the radio, how to speak on the television, conduct a media interview, speak on behalf of an organization, business in a regular or crisis situation. Thank you all and have a good day or night.